Rat sightings are on the decline, according to the Department of Sanitation. It says sightings reported to 311 have been steadily dropping for the last 12 months.
They're everywhere.
Oh my God, look at them all.
Dirty, stinking rats. Dozens of them.
New York City has fought rats for generations with poison, traps, dogs, sanitation crackdowns, and even a multi-million-dollar war on rodents. But in certain parts of Manhattan, Brooklyn, and the Bronx, something strange is happening. The rats are not just being killed, they are changing their movement. Their complaints are dropping, and in some zones, their numbers are falling in ways city officials cannot fully explain. For years, New York looked underground for the answer, in subway tunnels, garbage piles, alleyways, and boroughs. But the real force may have been above the streets the entire time, because high over the rooftops, water towers, parks, and building ledges, native hunters are returning. Peregrine falcons, great horned owls, red-tailed hawks. Predators that were once nearly erased from the city's skies are now reclaiming the airspace, and New York's rats may not know how to survive them. This is the story of how America's most rat-infested city may have found an unexpected ally in nature, and why the future of New York's rat problem might depend on what is already hunting them from above. She picked up the phone, called the Urban Ecology Coordination Office, and said 5 words. Something is hunting them up there. Stay with Terra Factor as we go deep into one of the most unexpected ecological shifts unfolding right now in New York City. Because in specific block clusters and park corridor zones across Manhattan, Brooklyn, and the Bronx, something is happening that no extermination contract, sanitation crackdown, or $32 million rat reduction program has ever fully achieved. Norway rat populations in those zones are dropping measurably, without any human removal program explaining the decline. And the answer points toward native predators that were nearly absent from New York City skies for most of the 20th century. Predators quietly returning, predators hunting after dark above the streets of America's most rat-infested city in a system nobody designed. To understand why this matters, you first have to understand what Norway rats have done to New York. They are not native to North America. They arrived in the 1700s on ships from Europe, hiding in cargo holds and spreading through port cities. By the time anyone understood the invasion, the population was already uncountable. In 2014, Fordham statistician Jonathan Auerbach estimated about 2 million rats across the 5 boroughs using 311 complaint data. By 2023, a new study placed the number at 3 million, nearly 1 rat for every 3 New Yorkers. That meant the population had grown 50% in a decade, despite every effort the city could fund. The damage is not theoretical. Norway rats chew through car wiring, trigger fires, burrow beneath foundations, and contaminate food supplies across restaurants, groceries, and storage systems in a city feeding millions every day. They also carry more than 35 documented human pathogens, including leptospirosis and salmonella. In 2023, New York recorded a record. By 2023, a new study placed the number at 3 million, nearly 1 rat for every 3 New Yorkers. That meant the population had grown 50% in a decade, despite every effort the city could fund. The damage is not theoretical. Norway rats chew through car wiring, trigger fires, burrow beneath foundations, and contaminate food supplies across restaurants, groceries, and storage systems in a city feeding millions every day. They also carry more than 35 documented human pathogens, including leptospirosis and salmonella. In 2023, New York recorded a record 24 leptospirosis cases. Across American cities, rat activity causes an estimated $27 billion in annual damage. In New York alone, the total exceeds $1 billion when health costs, infrastructure damage, and food contamination are combined. So the city fought back. In 2017, New York launched a $32 million rat reduction initiative targeting 3 high-density neighborhoods, aiming for a 70% population reduction. Solar-powered compacting trash bins went into 336 locations. Many already knew, you give it a couple of months and it is right back where it was. We have never found a tool capable of bending this population curve. The rats breed faster than any removal program can remove them, and they learn to avoid every intervention we deploy. Fordham researchers had said the same thing. Introduced predators cannot reduce rat populations at city scale. Only removing the food source can do that. But in a city of 8 million people producing thousands of tons of organic waste every day, eliminating the food source has never been achieved. Then the Upper Manhattan complaint data stopped making sense. Dr. Marcus Webb had spent 8 years studying urban wildlife corridors across New York. He cross-referenced bird monitoring transects with mammal activity patterns in park-adjacent block clusters across all 5 boroughs. When Rachel's Upper Manhattan data reached him, he spent 3 weeks testing it against every variable in his baseline set. Then he drove to the site, climbed onto the roof of a parking structure at dusk, and looked up. There it was, a peregrine falcon, not a passing bird, not a transient, a resident pair nesting on the water tower of a building 2 blocks from the cluster, showing the steepest rat complaint decline in Rachel's 11-year dataset. When Marcus compared the data, the correlation was impossible to ignore. Every zone showing measurable rat reduction also had concentrated raptor activity above the open corridors, lots and edges where rats moved most heavily during evening foraging hours. Peregrine falcons were functionally extinct across the eastern United States by the 1960s. DDT moved through the food chain, thinning eggshells and collapsing breeding populations from Maine to Florida. Federal protection helped stop the exposure. A coordinated reintroduction program began in the 1970s, placing captive-bred birds on cliff faces and building ledges across the eastern seaboard. New York City turned out to be extraordinary peregrine habitat. Skyscrapers replicated cliff walls, building ledges became nesting sites, and the city's enormous pigeon and starling populations gave breeding pairs a prey base no rural cliff system could match. By 2020, New York City supported more than 30 documented peregrine nesting pairs, the highest urban peregrine density of any city in North America. But the complaint data suggested something more than recovery. It suggested behavioral suppression at street level. Norway rats in open lots and rail yard habitats do most of their surface foraging between dusk and midnight. A peregrine pair holding territory above those zones hunts during that exact window. The strike comes from above, silent, at speeds exceeding 200 miles per hour. A rat crossing open pavement beneath an active peregrine territory has no behavioral coding for that kind of threat. Norway rats evolved around ground-level predators. They are extremely sensitive to lateral danger: cats, dogs, humans, and movement across the ground plane. Their avoidance behavior is so refined that exterminators describe them as almost impossible to approach without triggering escape. But their vigilance is horizontal. They watch the street, they monitor shadows at ground level, they respond to threats moving toward them. They have no equivalent response for a bird dropping vertically from above at highway speed. For most of the 300 years rats were establishing themselves in New York, peregrine falcons were not present in that airspace. There was nothing to encode, nothing to fear from above. Now that absence is over, and peregrines are only the first layer. Great horned owls are adding a second layer of pressure in park-adjacent corridors. Pairs have established in Central Park, Prospect Park, and Pelham Bay Park at densities wildlife surveys from 20 years ago did not record. At 2 o'clock in the morning, a great horned owl hunting a park perimeter encounters rats moving through ground cover, lawn margins, and dark edges where food and shelter meet. The owl's silent flight removes the sound cue rats depend on. Its night vision gives it access to the late-night foraging window after peregrines stop hunting, exactly when park edge rat movement peaks. An owl can strike from 60 feet above without producing any warning signal the rat's lateral threat system can register. Where owl territory and peregrine territory overlap, complaint declines stretch across a longer daily window than either predator creates alone. Then comes the third layer, red-tailed hawks. Red-tailed hawks now nest on building ledges and water towers across all 5 boroughs. During daylight hours, they pressure open lots, construction corridors, and park-linked habitats that connect movement routes between boroughs. In zones where red-tailed hawk daytime territory overlaps with great horned owl night territory and peregrine evening territory, Dr. Webb's data shows the steepest and most sustained rat complaint declines. None of this was planned. Peregrine protection was designed to save a species from DDT-driven extinction. Reintroduction was meant to restore a native bird to its range. Nobody wrote New York City rat suppression into the recovery plan. The $32 million rat initiative did not center raptors. The Rat Czar's framework did not include aerial predator monitoring. Great horned owl expansion was treated as a birding observation. Red-tailed hawk nesting was documented by wildlife photographers, not rat control teams. The connection between 3 recovering native raptor species and measurable rat declines stayed invisible until 11 years of complaint data finally moved in a direction nobody expected, and one researcher looked up. The city had spent $32 million looking at street level. The answer was 60 feet above it. Dr. Okafor returned to that upper Manhattan block cluster 4 times after the discovery. She walked the perimeter at dusk on each visit. On the 3rd visit, she saw it happen. A peregrine falcon struck a Norway rat crossing open pavement between a building foundation and a parked vehicle. The entire strike took less than 2 seconds. The bird was gone before anyone on the block understood what had happened. Rachel stood there for several minutes. In 11 years of tracking rat data, she had never watched the mechanism behind a declining number in her own data set. She had been reading that decline for 3 seasons without explanation. The explanation had been above her every evening since the pair established its nesting site. Some things only make sense when you finally look up. Can peregrine falcons, great horned owls, and red-tailed hawks expand fast enough through New York City's airspace and park corridors to create population-level effects on Norway rats before the invasion overwhelms any natural suppression they can generate? Drop your honest answer in the comments below. And if this story changed the way you think about what is already working above the streets of America's most rat-infested city, subscribe to Terra Factor. We will see you in the next one.